Max Bennett stood outside the restaurant on Main Street, its neon sign glowing softly in the early evening light. The establishment had been a landmark in the community for decades, a testament to his grandfather Edward Bennett's hard work and vision. It had been 6 months since Edward passed away, and Max, fresh out of university with a degree in economics, was now at the helm. The transition was anything but smooth. Max admired his grandfather's tenacity, remembering stories of how Edward transformed the cafe from a modest gathering spot for students and office workers into a culinary institution. Now the burden of maintaining and enhancing that legacy rested on Max's shoulders, and he felt every ounce of its weight. Inside the office, Max sat at his desk, papers strewn about in a chaotic array. Monthly financial reports painted a grim picture. Profits were steadily declining, and Max couldn't pinpoint the exact cause. His phone buzzed with a reminder for a meeting, but he was already lost in thought, eyes fixed on the columns of figures that refused to make sense. Laura, the restaurant's administrator and a steady presence since Edward's time, knocked lightly on the open door. "Max, do you have a minute?" she asked, stepping into the office. "Sure, Laura. Come in," Max replied, rubbing his temples. "I could use a break from these numbers." Laura sat down, a concerned expression on her face. "I've been going over the supplier invoices, and I noticed something strange. Some of the ingredients listed are of lower quality than what we're paying for." Max sighed. "I had a feeling something was off. Peter Clarkson. He's been here for years and he's a great chef, but I don't know. I suspect he might be up to something." Laura nodded. "I've heard rumors. Staff say he's difficult to work with and has a temper, but no one's been able to prove anything." Max leaned back in his chair, pondering. "We need evidence. Without it, I can't justify firing him, but these losses are killing us. If this keeps up, we might not make it through the year." Just then, Peter Clarkson himself stormed into the office without knocking, his face flushed with irritation. "Max, we need to talk about these budget cuts. They're making it impossible to run the kitchen properly." Max straightened, meeting Peter's gaze. "Budget cuts are necessary because our profits are down, Peter. I'm doing everything I can to keep this place afloat." Peter scoffed. "Maybe if you spent more time in the kitchen and less time with your head buried in those reports, you'd see that the problem isn't with the food." Max's jaw tightened. "I'm aware of what goes on in my kitchen, Peter. And I'm also aware that we've been receiving ingredients that don't match what we're paying for." Peter's eyes narrowed. "Are you accusing me of something?" "Not yet," Max replied evenly, "but I intend to find out what's going on." Peter muttered something under his breath and stormed out, leaving Max and Laura in tense silence. Laura broke the silence. "He's hiding something, Max. I can feel it." Max nodded. "I know. But we need proof. For now, keep an eye on the invoices and let me know if you find anything else suspicious." As Laura left the office, Max returned to his reports, the weight of his grandfather's legacy pressing down harder than ever. He was determined to uncover the truth, whatever it took. The rain poured down relentlessly, drumming against the windows of the restaurant on Main Street. Inside, the ambience was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the gloomy weather outside. Max Bennett sat at his desk, sifting through more financial reports, his frustration growing with each passing minute. The numbers still didn't add up, and he felt the weight of his grandfather's legacy heavier than ever. A soft knock on the door broke his concentration. It was Laura, her expression a mix of concern and curiosity. "Max, there's someone here to see you," she said, her voice hesitant. "He says he's looking for work." Max frowned. "In this weather? Who is it?" Laura shrugged slightly. "I don't know. He looks like he's fallen on hard times." Intrigued and somewhat wary, Max followed Laura to the front of the restaurant. Standing near the entrance was a man in his 30s, his clothes soaked and his hair disheveled. Despite his shabby appearance, there was a calm determination in his eyes. "Hello," Max greeted, extending a hand. "I'm Max Bennett. What can I do for you?" The man shook his hand, his grip firm. "David Thompson. I'm looking for any kind of work you might have. I can cook, clean, whatever you need." Max raised an eyebrow. "Cook, you say? Do you have any experience?" David nodded. "I know French and Italian cuisine quite well. I just need a chance." Before Max could respond, Peter Clarkson appeared, drawn by the conversation. He looked David up and down, a sneer forming on his lips. You cook French and Italian? Peter laughed derisively. You look like you barely know how to boil water. David met Peter's gaze steadily. I can cook. Give me a chance and I'll prove it. Max, sensing something genuine in David's demeanor, decided to take a risk. All right, let's see what you can do. Come with me to the kitchen. The kitchen was bustling with activity, but it quieted as Max, Peter, and David entered. The staff exchanged curious glances, whispering among themselves. Max addressed the room. Everyone, this is David Thompson. He's going to prepare a dish for us today. Lasagna. Let's see what he can do. Peter folded his arms, clearly skeptical. This should be good. David washed his hands and set to work, moving with a surprising grace and confidence. As he assembled the lasagna, the staff watched intently. Max noticed the precision with which David layered the pasta, meat, and cheese, the meticulous way he seasoned the sauce. Despite his worn appearance, David's skill was undeniable. As the lasagna baked, the aroma began to fill the kitchen, causing mouths to water. When it was finally done, David served a portion to Max, Peter, and a few of the staff. Max took a bite, his eyes widening in surprise. The flavors were rich and perfectly balanced, the pasta tender, the sauce bursting with taste. Peter begrudgingly had to admit it was excellent. Not bad, he muttered. Max smiled, turning to David. You're hired, David. Welcome to the team. David's eyes shone with gratitude. Thank you, Max. You won't regret this. Later that evening, as the restaurant began to wind down for the night, Max found David in the kitchen, cleaning up. You did great today, David, Max said, joining him. Thanks, Max. I really appreciate the opportunity, David replied, pausing his work. I know I don't look like much right now, but I promise I'll work hard. Max nodded. I believe you, but I have to ask, what brought you here? What's your story? David sighed, leaning against the counter. It's a long one. I used to own a chain of cafes in Miami. Things were going well until I found my wife with another man. In a moment of rage, I attacked him. I thought I'd killed him, so I ran. It turns out he survived, but by then, I was already on the streets, trying to escape my past. Max listened, sympathy growing. That's a lot to carry. But you're here now, and as long as you're willing to work, you're part of the team. David nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Thank you, Max. I won't let you down. Max clapped him on the shoulder. Get some rest. Tomorrow's a new day. As David left the kitchen, Max felt a renewed sense of purpose. There was still a lot of work to do, but with David's help, he was determined to turn things around. David Thompson quickly became a valued member of the team, his culinary skills breathing new life into the restaurant's menu. Customers praised the rich, flavorful dishes that David crafted, and slowly but surely the restaurant's fortunes began to turn around. Despite his growing popularity, David remained a mystery to most, and Max couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his story. One evening, after the last customer had left and the staff were finishing their closing tasks, Max decided it was time to learn more about David's past. He found David in the kitchen, meticulously cleaning the counters. David, can we talk for a minute? Max asked, leaning against the doorway. David looked up, a bit wary but nodded. Sure, Max. What's on your mind? Max gestured to a small table in the corner of the kitchen. Let's sit down. Once they were seated, Max began. You've been a tremendous help here, and the customers love your food. But I think it's time I learned more about you. You mentioned you were on the run. Can you tell me what happened? David sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. I suppose you deserve to know the full story. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I used to own a chain of cafes in Miami. Business was good, and I was on the brink of success. But then everything fell apart. Max listened intently as David continued. One day, I came home early from work and found my wife with her fitness trainer. I lost control. In a fit of rage, I grabbed a figurine and hit him over the head. He collapsed, and I thought I'd killed him. I panicked and ran, leaving everything behind. David's voice trembled slightly. For months, I lived on the streets, moving from town to town, trying to escape what I thought was a murder charge. It wasn't until recently that I learned he survived, but by then my life was already in shambles. Max leaned back, absorbing the story. That's a lot to go through. But why didn't you try to clear your name? David shook his head. I was too scared. And by the time I found out he survived, I was too far gone to return. I didn't think anyone would believe me. Max nodded thoughtfully. I believe you, David, and I think it's time we set the record straight. I'm going to take a trip to Miami and see what I can find out. David's eyes widened. You'd do that for me. Max smiled. You've done a lot for this restaurant. It's the least I can do. Max made the trip to Miami, determined to uncover the truth. He spent days digging through public records and tracking down old acquaintances of David's. Eventually, he found the fitness trainer, alive and well, now married to David's ex-wife. They had even declared David legally dead. Back at the restaurant, the staff grew anxious with Max's absence. Laura, in particular, was worried. She confided in David as they closed up one night. Do you think Max is okay? She asked, her brow furrowed. David nodded, though his expression was tense. He'll be fine. Max is resourceful. I just hope he finds what he's looking for. 3 days later, Max returned. The moment he walked through the door, the staff surrounded him, eager for news. Max raised a hand to calm them and went straight to find David, who was in the kitchen preparing for the evening service. David? Max called out. David turned, relief washing over his face at the sight of Max. What did you find? David asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Max smiled. The fitness trainer is alive. He married your ex-wife, and they've moved on with their lives. They even declared you dead. David's eyes filled with tears. So I'm free. Max nodded. You're free. And I want you to stay here as my business partner. David was speechless for a moment. Then he pulled Max into a tight embrace. Thank you, Max. You've given me my life back. Max patted his back. You've earned it, David. Now let's make this restaurant the best it can be. With the truth unveiled, David's relief was palpable. He threw himself into his work with renewed vigor, and the restaurant flourished. Customers flocked to taste his exquisite dishes, and the positive reviews poured in. Max and David worked seamlessly together, their partnership bringing out the best in the restaurant. Meanwhile, Max's relationship with Laura deepened. They spent more time together, both in and out of work, and it wasn't long before they realized their feelings for each other. One evening, after the restaurant had closed, Max and Laura sat together, reflecting on how far they had come. You know, Max began, taking Laura's hand. I couldn't have done this without you. You've been my rock through all of this. Laura smiled, squeezing his hand, and I couldn't imagine being anywhere else. Max looked into her eyes, feeling a warmth spread through him. I love you, Laura. Laura's eyes sparkled. I love you too, Max. As they kissed, the future of the restaurant and their lives looked brighter than ever.